Hello, Colorado. My name is Kareem Weaver. I appreciate the introduction and opportunity to join you all today. And I think I have a few things to share with you. If you'll bear with me just a little while, and then off you go into the rest of your event. I am representing Fulcrum, which stands for Full and Complete Reading as a Universal Mandate. I'm a co-founder. I'm also on the Education Committee of the Oakland NAACP and the California-Hawaii State Conference of the NAACP. I am a longtime educator, teacher, principal, central office, nonprofit leader, trainer of principals. You know, I led new leaders in the Western region for about 5 years. So I've done a lot and seen a lot. And I have a few things to share with you today. Thank you for the invitation. Time is limited, so let's jump right into it. First of all, I want to congratulate you as a state. The READ Act is tremendous. And then, of course, it was added to recently to make very specific the things that need to happen in prep programs to support, for teacher development, to support their ability to deliver in the classroom. But that combined with the Ed Preparation Program Review that as a state you've undertaken is laudable. Now, I'll explain where that sits in things in just a moment, but those two things combined, I've seen states do things before without the Ed Prep Program Review. It's not the same. It's not the same. To bring the higher ed folks, to bring you all into this space is very, 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 very important. So first, I just want to stop and commend you, Colorado, for taking the lead on this. Because across the country, people are paying rapt attention to what goes on there. A little bit of context. So NAACP, you probably know this. I don't have to spend too much time on it, but the arc of social justice is every 30 years or so, ever since Nat Turner's Rebellion, 1831 in Virginia, every 30 years or so, there's this wave of change and growth and social justice moving towards that arc, as Dr. King described it, as it bends towards justice. It's long, but it bends. Well, here we are in 2010, in this 30-year cycle. And the question now is, will we be able to promote literacy? Will we be able to ensure that all of our residents are able to access society? That individual sitting with Dr. King is Ambassador Andrew Young, who's one of his close friends, godfather of his son. They had a pillow fight the day he was killed. I'll come back to Andy Young in a second, but social justice now in the information age is about access to information. And you all are the vanguard for that. Andy Young told me, he's been something of a mentor, that it's like the Statue of Liberty. And everybody looks at the torch and the tablets and all this. He said, but that was their job, was to light the torch. He says, our job now is to deputize people to go after the feet. If you look at the feet of the Statue of Liberty, you'll see it chained. Illiteracy is the chain on the feet of freedom. You can't go anywhere if you're illiterate in the information age. So he said, deputize people, deputize as many as you can. My job today is to deputize you, to begin this conference with a keynote that just says, I'm deputizing me, something that's been passed down for those architects of the civil rights movement and our modern civil rights movement to say, hey, guess what? You're a part of that, whether you intended to be or not. I'm deputizing you, as was told for me to do. So let's get into it. You probably know about the NAEP results. Most folks stayed the same over the course of a few years. Some went down. Colorado stayed the same right here, along with California and most other folks. But then Mississippi went up. The kids actually had an increase in their reading proficiency. And I'm sure you've heard this. This is not news, right? But what happened? Well, they started with the review of the teacher prep programs. That's where they started. And they found that these prep programs, these universities, alternative programs, traditional programs, they really didn't teach foundational skills consistently. Not that they didn't teach it, but oftentimes, as I've been engaged with universities, you know how it is. The methods, one teacher has a different philosophy than the methods two teacher. They sit across the table from each other and they stare at each other warily, right? Not everyone was on the same page. And the things were taught, but it wasn't systematic. It wasn't vertically aligned. And then some just were missing key pieces. And then secondly, that this idea of a balance meant different things to different people. The structures were inconsistent for the early ed courses, but balance meant different things to different people. And so that produced inconsistent results. So as a result of that, the state of Mississippi said, forget the universities, forget the prep programs, the EPPs. We're going to put money straight to the districts. And let them and the educators and say, look, you can go get the professional development. We're going to skip over the universities and the prep programs and the alternate pathway programs, all that, forget them. But you can't, and I get it, the urgency of it, and people will laud them for doing that. And some people say, wow, wonderful, you are innovative. But I would propose that you all are the gatekeepers. And that if we don't have the prep programs on board to ensure that foundational skills are taught and that teachers are prepared to deliver that kind of instruction with the knowledge and the skill to mastery, then we're just going to be hamsters on the wheel, right? Never really going anywhere. We've got to get the EPPs on board. And that's why I'm so happy to speak to you all today. You may be familiar with Nancy Young's ladder of reading. That synthesizes the research, distills it down to understandable chunks. The reality is most of our kids are that 40 to 65% of folks that they need what the research says they need. That's the majority of kids. And there's some that really don't need us, right? It's effortless. They're going to learn to read regardless, with or without us. Then you have folks, 35%, about a third say, well, there's no one way. And you're right. There is no one way to teach reading, because about a third of kids will learn in a variety of ways. So it's true. It is absolutely true. There's no one way to teach a child to read. However, the goal, and from the NAACP's perspective, the goal ought to be, how can we get the greatest number of kids reading proficient? And to do that, we've got to go after these kids, with you all leading the way, because they have to have it. They have to have it systematic, direct, explicit. And then, of course, you have the kids who are dyslexic, who've got some auditory processing issues or some other things going on, that they've got to have it that way. That's 2/3 of the kids. And these folks are not disadvantaged by what they need. It turns out that everyone needs this. Everyone benefits from this, I should say. Everyone benefits from it. Listen, it's okay for you to learn Latin. It's okay for you to understand Greek roots, regardless of where you come in. And when they talk about structured literacy, they're simply saying the stuff that your READ Act says. The READ Act says very clearly, here are the things that needs to be done. Teachers have to have this skill going in. And we call these the 5 pillars. There's more, there's oral language development, there's writing, and there's some other stuff, but you gotta have this. And there's no war. That's so 80s and 90s, as I would say. There's no war. Everybody agrees to this. Now, you may disagree on how much or whatever, but what the research says is you got to have these things, and it has to be systematic, explicit, and direct. And that's what the READ Act says. And I'm so grateful that you all are taking this initial first step. It's also what the American Federation of Teachers has been saying for 20 years, but nobody's been listening to them. It's also what the research consensus. You see John Hattie there, he had 300 million kids total in their meta-analysis. They've been saying the same thing. AFT, I won't read all this with you, but they basically say the same thing the READ Act says, same thing. But I do want to focus here. Yes, the National Reading Panel came out and that says the same thing. It says the same thing. But on the right, this Department of Justice report, often overlooked, came out about 20 years ago. And in it, and this is the prison system. This is the what are they saying? It's like, what does the hospital say about the people that are coming in? They're doing diagnosis and they say, well, actually the root cause is this. Well, this is what the prisons are saying. They're saying their reading failure or academic failure and delinquency are welded together. Welded. To reading failure, I should say. Welded. And that they propose to teach kids to read using what the research says to teach kids how to. That's what the prisons are saying. To just be systematic and all that. That's what they're saying. They went on to say, it's not just a relationship, it's a cause. It took me a while. I had to sit with this for a second. It's a cause. They can't read, they cannot decode, they cannot decipher fluently and accurately, and that's why they're ending up locked up in here. We're telling you, they're trumpeting it to the rest of society. And will anybody listen to us? And we in education for many years have said, you don't know what you're talking about. Listen, we're going to do what we want to do. What do you know? Department of Justice went on to say, there's no evidence that a lot of these kids that are locked up, that there's anything abnormal about them. And then the ones that are handicapped or have some perception or some auditory issue like dyslexia, some other learning disability, they didn't get the type of instruction, hear me on this, that the research, now they said experimental research, that's 20 years ago. No experimental anymore. That they're not getting what they needed and what's recommended by the research. That's where you come in, Colorado. They went on to say, and I'm gonna read this, the reading teachers, as a result of pre-service reading methods courses, have been denied a working knowledge of reading programs and methods of instruction. Not a strategy, it's a method of instruction that are most successful in preventing, Lord have mercy, whether a kid has dyslexia or not, everybody knows what they need. The research is clear. This isn't rocket science. So you are here. You are at the vanguard of addressing this 20-year-old missive, treatise, statement, whatever you want to call it, from the Department of Justice. And what they're saying is, look, when it is not, we have to prepare our teachers so that they're not skipping steps. You can call it whatever you want to, queuing and this and that, whatever. Our teachers need to be able to walk it up systematically, step by step. You can't, if we skip steps and we're trying to get this many people up the steps, is going to be a problem. So I commend you for the step you've taken. There'll be some who look warily at you, internally and externally. And you might hear things like this. I've sat with deans and professors at those tables. I've met with faculty. And so I've heard the conversations that go on. I know. Not everybody may be on board, and that's the reality of it. So how can you, as a government, tell us what to do when we're not even sure? And we have autonomy. We're the university. We're the research institution. I've heard it all. That's why it's so impressive what you're doing. To say, yeah, we know that, and we're going to follow the science. So what I would say is, when you hear these types of things, the response might be, look, you don't have to fight every fight. You got enough to deal with on your own right now. It's time for you to pick up your picket sign and march. That's why I'm here today, representing the NAACP. Pick up your picket sign and march. You have a job to do. The country is watching you and looking at you saying, should we go the Mississippi model and go around these universities, or should we include them in the solution? My offering this, in the NAACP's offering, is we have to include the prep programs. We have to include the universities. Recently, the 2018 President Donald Trump signed the First Step Act. You may be familiar with this. When you go into federal prison now, they screen you for dyslexia automatically, and then they have to give you certain, basically, accommodations if you have low reading to help you get a GED. Okay. Now, here's the situation we currently have in our country. Many of our kids have to catch a federal case to get the help they need. Not a state crime. You can't just go rob a store. You got to carjack. There's some things that rise a level of a federal offense. That's when you get to help you. Currently, structurally, in this country, that's the way it is. What you all are saying is, no. In our state, we are going to attend to the research consensus and the brain science beforehand. We're not going to have a wait to fail model. That is revolutionary. I could, this is my nephew, formerly my niece, dyslexic, learned to read, learned really to got what he needed in prison. So what I'm telling you is not a theory. This is not some ivory tower speech. As a keynote, I want to tell you the reality of this. We need you in the field. I have a link here to a little video I interviewed him. He said, "Uncle, I didn't know. They thought I was just not taking it seriously. They thought I was just being bad. They thought this, they thought that." While his father was out working 2 and 3 jobs. And I said, "Did your teachers know how to teach you?" No, they didn't know. They didn't know. It's not for lack of intention. It's not because people don't care. People love kids. That's why you get into education in the first place in K-12 and higher ed too. But if they don't know, they don't know. They can't make bricks without straw. Let me move on. The civil rights component of this, and I'll close with these last few slides. The civil rights component of this cannot be ignored. Many times when we look at our predecessors in the civil rights movement, with the NAACP and other organizations, there are folks who are on the front lines. And a lot of press, you see Dr. King and Stokely Carmichael and H. Rap Brown and Big James Bevel and all these folks, and Andy Young, Representative John Lewis, may rest in peace, et cetera. All these folks, and Mukasa Willie Ricks, all these folks did what they could do. And we tend to train the camera on them as they met their moment. Fine. Fine. But in a civil rights struggle, it's not a glamour show. Frantz Fanon, in his book, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, said every generation of relative opacity has to discover its mission and either fulfill it or betray it. This is a mission. We're foot soldiers. You may not get on CNN. You may not be given a keynote. You may not be, featured to have a statue raised. In that relative obscurity, that's the mission. We need foot soldiers in the struggle for civil rights that's been going on since 1830 and Nat Turner's Rebellion. We need people to pick up their signs and march. We need professors who will say, you know what, even if I'm not quite sure about this, I understand that there's a research consensus. I understand what the AFT was saying. I understand what John Hattie's research said. I understand what the Department of Justice and the National Reading Panel, I get it. Okay. I will not betray this mission. To the best of my ability, I'm going to do my research. I'm going to figure things out, but I'm going to do my part. Because most people, it's not the celebrity status. Civil rights is never sexy. Maybe generations down the road, they hated Dr. King. They hated Denmark Vesey. They hated Malcolm. In the moment, when it's not on television or captured on an iPhone, the down and dirty work of advocating for civil rights is never easy and rarely ever glamorous. It's regular people deciding to pick up their signs and march. You are here, Colorado. Your EPP, your faculty, your class, your syllabus, your lesson, your observation, your feedback. You are here. This is your moment. While the rest of the country looks and says, let's see if this is going to work. Let's see. Let's see. I knew those kids couldn't learn. I knew those teachers couldn't teach. See, we need to go back to the way it was. Forget the research, forget the science. We're spending too much money, time, and energy on those kids in the first place. You are here. And there may not be armed guards and dogs at your heels. But Colorado, you're on the front lines, whether you know it or not. That's why I'm here today. I'm deputizing you to do this work. as I was told to do. You got to pick up your sign and march. And on top of that, I just want to give you and leave you with this perspective. Mother Maya said this, Maya Angelou. She said, this is in an interview some years ago, almost 20 years ago. She said in a conversation with an interviewer, she said that, advice she would give to kids today would be to read. Just read. That's what she would give. They say, if you read, you can take your mind anywhere. And the interviewer said, but what if they can't read? Maya Angelou said, and you see it here in red, the elimination of illiteracy is as serious an issue to our history as the abolition of slavery. This is your moonshot. This is your moment. It's great to have the READ Act. It's great to have the EPP review. That's wonderful. That is watershed status. That's fantastic. And it means nothing if you don't pick up your sign and march. In the faculty rooms, all across the state, we're counting on you to dig in. I'll leave you with this thought from my ancestors. I'm an American descendant of enslaved persons. My mother's grandfather was enslaved. He wasn't a slave, he was enslaved. He was a human being. I want you to think about the moment of Jubilee. Here you are, can't read or write or spell. You have no marketable skills outside of what you've been taught to do. There's a war raging and people are hurt and bitter and in pain as loved ones all around have been lost, and they blame you. You, this troublesome property, are the cause of all this death, destruction, and despair. And now somebody says, you can go. Without a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of, they turn you loose like cattle. No laws to protect you. Army is gone. You are on your own. What do you do? Where do you go? Where do you lay your head? Do you leave? Do you stay? I bring that to your attention because there are moments where the road is not clear. Where even though the laws of the country and systems have been amended or changed, society hasn't caught up yet. The reality hasn't caught up with the rules. And so you have to take a leap of faith to say, I'm getting up out of here. I'm going to change. I'm going to make some shifts. I'm going to figure this thing out come hell or high water, because the pain of staying behind is too great. And I don't want to leave that to posterity. And so what I urge you to do is to harness the energy and the courage of that generation, to take a chance, to pick up your sign and march forward, not knowing if you have all the answers, committing yourself to learning and diligence and research, et cetera, having good conversations, but not so much that they're stifling to your own growth. This is time for debate. Let folks have that engagement, but you can't get stuck in that, but you got to go. We need you for posterity's sake. So Colorado, congratulations on the growth you've made. I hope this conference and this gathering is fruitful and produces what it is intended to produce, but I want you to know the rest of the country is looking at you and grateful to you for the steps you have taken. The Mississippi model is not sustainable. We can't go around the universities. We need your help. We need you to pick up your sign and march.